You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron. Now here's your host, Ethan Haristadoulou.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Greeks Gridiron. I am Ethan Haristadoulou, and today previewing our second Monday Night Football matchup, this one between the Washington Commanders and the Chicago Bears. If you have not already, once you wrap up here, make sure you check out my Bills and Falcons Monday Night Football preview. I have a separate discussion for that one you can find on the channel. If you haven't seen any of my other predictions, make sure you're subscribed. That being said, Bears Commanders, Monday Night Football, Chicago coming off a bye week and looking very healthy for this one. Meanwhile, you can't really say so much of the same for Washington with some concerns around a lot of different guys. So getting into this game here, I think the first thing that I've got to look at is going to be just how Chicago looked going into their bye week and the confidence they kind of gave me in them as a team. The game against Las Vegas, ultimately blocking that field goal to win, that's a game that in years past you feel like Chicago loses. And then the week prior to that, obviously a really good showing as well with a nice victory. So you rattle off a couple of good wins, 2 straight. And again, blowing out Dallas, phenomenal for them. Because Dallas has looked pretty solid, at least so far this season, depending on the opponent that they've played. And again, Las Vegas, not a great team. You're in the position of like slipping away and losing that matchup, but you ultimately seal the win. Huge for them. 4 turnovers forced in both of those games by Chicago's defense is where I've got to start, because Washington, so far this season, very good at protecting the football. And that's even knowing, you didn't have Jayden Daniels, for 2 different games this season so far. But they have had at least 1 turnover in each of their last 3 games. So not a ton of turnovers, but they are averaging, at least lately, about 1 per game. With that in mind, the way that Chicago Bears defense seems to be developing, it's a very aggressive unit, one that is looking to make a play and hurt you when possible. It's definitely something that I'm keeping an eye on, especially with Washington relying on so many guys, because you're missing a Terry McLaurin, a Noah Brown. Some of those younger guys have to step up, make plays. And we're talking, maybe it's an incorrect route run where Jayden Daniels thinks the ball's going one way and the receiver goes another, something along those lines. Somebody makes a mistake, whatever it may be. Like, those are things you always have to think about with that type of situation. So I'm very interested in seeing if this Chicago Bears team can keep up that momentum of taking the football away and giving their offense more opportunities to score. The other thing that I'll be looking at is both these defenses, so far how it's looked this season, not necessarily great when it comes to defending the pass. Chicago allowing 215 yards per game is about 16th in the NFL. So average, not bad, not good, in the middle. 10 passing touchdowns allowed, though, puts them in the upper third of the league. Whereas Washington, a little bit more on the yardage side, 235 per game, which is good for 10th most in the NFL. So they're inside the bottom 10 of the league. And then 8 passing touchdowns allowed. So a few passing touchdowns less, but more yardage, flip-flop for both sides. So you look at the quarterback matchup and how these guys stack up against each other. Caleb Williams, 231 yards per game passing with about a 62% completion rate. And then Jayden Daniels sitting at 221 at about a 59% completion rate. Both of these guys have had their struggles this season. We've seen good performances from them, and we've also seen some tough performances from both of these guys as they navigate year 2 of the season. This is where relying on those lead guys, the guys that have really stepped up for them this season, I think is going to be crucial. And I do kind of give a slight edge to Chicago on this one here, because Rome Odunze has looked unbelievable with the 5 touchdowns he's caught, the 296 yards as well. He has been, he's basically the guy that Chicago drafted last season to pair with Caleb Williams. He has really elevated his game through the first 5 weeks of this NFL season. And then you look at Jayden Daniels. He has Deebo Samuel right now. It's unfortunate that Terry McLaurin's been battling this injury bug so far for what feels like basically the duration of this season here, and he just can't quite get himself on the field. 3 touchdowns, though, for Deebo Samuel, 300 yards receiving. He has still been very effective, and it's clear that this team is very much behind him. He is beloved in Washington right now from the way it sounds, and he stepped up big time in the absence of Terry McLaurin. If McLaurin was on this football field as well, I'd feel a lot better about Washington's passing attack, but you have a pretty good secondary in Chicago that you have to deal with, and not having Terry McLaurin or a Noah Brown this season is really affecting that passing game, and is one of those things that you're hoping they get back sooner rather than later, but they're not there for this game. So definitely something worth keeping in mind. Now, one other thing I need to get into, because it's just one of those things I'm absolutely fascinated by, because I love when this sort of thing happens every season. Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt has had a very interesting season so far this year. Week 1 and Week 5. Unbelievable, dominating performances, and as recently as last week in that Week 5 matchup against LAC, 2 touchdowns, 150 total yards of offense from both catching the football and running with the football on the ground. He sandwiched 2 extremely strong performances around weeks 2 through 4. And you see the way that he played in both of these two, the first game and then the most recent game, averaging 8 yards per attempt on the ground when he was rocking and rolling in weeks 1 and in week 5. Obviously, weeks 2 through 4, not necessarily the most perfect. You also didn't have Jayden Daniels in the offense, so maybe that affected some things. But it is something that I'm watching in this game. And Chicago's run defense, for what it's worth, allowing 6.1 yards per attempt, which is the most in the NFL. And they're also allowing about 165 yards per game, which is second most in the NFL. With Jayden Daniels back in the fold, you have a thinner wide receiver room than you'd like going into this game here against a Chicago defense that is, again, not afraid to get after the football, make a play, and pick off the football as well. I do think that is something worth keeping in mind here, because if they can work with the read options and force the defense to take an extra second to kind of process what's going on, Corey Krosky-Merritt could be setting up for a monumental game against the Chicago Bears defense that has not been perfect against the run, and far from perfect, I should add. That being said, though, as for who I think is going to win, Washington's obviously favored in this game, and I mean, it being in Washington is a big help for them, and that's something that I'm having a really hard time getting away from the fact that, like, the Bears are allowing nearly 30 points per game this season, and you look at Washington's defense, they're allowing about 20 points per game. The Chicago Bears defense has not been perfect, and it is kind of an issue, but when you look at these two teams and the way they've matched up, Jayden Daniels, I don't think is quite back to 100% yet. And that's just one of those things that with the knee injury he's dealing with, until he's really all the way back, we're not going to see this offense hit its full level. So it makes me feel at least better about Chicago's defense in this game here, but I am still concerned nonetheless. Whereas I do have legitimate concerns about how young of an offense you're running with over there in Chicago right now, with Rome Odunze, Luther Burden, all seeing significant time. Obviously, you have DJ Moore, and you have a second-year quarterback. There's a lot of youth that you're relying on here. So I do have some concerns either way for this game, and it kind of feels like a little bit of a toss-up to me because, again, what Chicago did going into their bye week really made me buy into kind of what they're starting to do over there. It started off rocky, but again, you blow out Chicago, you have a game slipping away from you that typically Chicago is losing in years past, that you ultimately make a monumental play in to come and finish off and win. I think I'm leaning Chicago Bears on this one, so I do want to go Chicago, and I'll take them something along the lines of like a 27-23 tighter affair. I could definitely see this game going either way. It's no sure thing in my opinion, but I do like what we've seen from this Bears team over the first 4 weeks of the season. Fighting in those first 2 losses, ultimately rattling off a couple of back-to-back wins going into the bye, coming in rested and a little bit healthier than where Washington is. I think Chicago can get it done, even if it is on the road, being underdogs here. So give me the Bears 27-23, tighter contest. Should be an exciting one. I'm actually really looking forward to this Monday night doubleheader. I'm really not a big fan of them, but we have 2 interesting matchups where there's very good storylines between both teams coming into it that makes them entertaining watches. I just hope that the actual play on the football field ends up being that way. But comment down below. Let me hear from you. Thoughts, opinions on both these games. Who do you think's coming out on top and why? But as always, if you made it to the end, I greatly appreciate it. Next time you'll see me, we'll be talking Tuesday to rank all the teams and react to all the games, worst to first, through the power rankings we do every Tuesday. So until then, I'll see you all next time.